The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside Caldwell, Idaho, throwing Penelope Pierce face first into the dusty floorboards as gunshots cracked through the dry August air of 1882. And she knew with terrible certainty that her carefully constructed lies were about to catch up with her. She'd been running for 3 weeks, ever since she'd walked away from the Denver hotel where she'd been expected to marry Marcus Whitley, a silver baron's son with wandering hands and a cruel smile. Her father had arranged everything, down to the dress she'd wear and the vapid promises she'd make at the altar. But Penelope had other plans. She'd stolen enough money from her father's desk to buy passage west, forged a reference letter claiming to be a governess of impeccable character, and responded to an advertisement seeking a housekeeper for a cattle ranch outside Caldwell. The position promised room, board, and a fresh start, which was exactly what she needed. The stagecoach door flew open, and a masked man gestured with his revolver. "Everyone out. Now!" Penelope's hands trembled as she gathered her single carpet bag and climbed down. 3 other passengers, all men dressed in business attire, stood with their hands raised. The robbers, 4 of them on horseback, circled like wolves. "Valuables in the bag," the leader barked, tossing a burlap sack toward them. She had $37 left to her name hidden in her boot. It was supposed to last until her first wages. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp of her mother's silver locket, the only piece of jewelry she'd kept. As she dropped it into the sack, something inside her broke a little more. Then came the thunder of hooves from the east, and the robbers' horses spooked. A single rider appeared, silhouetted against the afternoon sun, moving with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd done this before. He wore no badge, carried a rifle across his saddle, and sat his horse like he'd been born there. "That's far enough, boys," the rider called out, his voice carrying an easy authority. "Drop your weapons and ride out, or I start shooting. Your choice." The lead robber laughed. "It's 4 against 1, friend. You can't be that stupid. I'm not your friend, and you'd be surprised what stupid looks like on me." What happened next took less than 10 seconds. The robber raised his gun, the rider's rifle cracked twice, and 2 of the bandits were clutching wounded arms before they could blink. The other 2 decided discretion was the better part of valor and spurred their horses into a gallop, their injured companions following close behind, leaving the burlap sack in the dust. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion and retrieved the bag. "Anyone hurt?" The businessmen rushed forward, offering thanks and handshakes, but Penelope stood frozen, studying the man who just saved them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of strong coffee. His face was all angles and weathered lines, suggesting he spent more time outdoors than in. She guessed he was in his late 20s, maybe 30 at most. Dust coated his clothes and his hat had seen better days, but he wore them with an unself-conscious grace. He turned those coffee-colored eyes on her, and she felt something shift in her chest. "Miss, you all right?" she nodded, not trusting her voice. He held out the burlap sack. "I believe these belong to you folks." As they sorted through their belongings, Penelope's fingers closed around her mother's locket. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by shame. This man had risked his life for strangers, and she couldn't even manage a "thank you." "Thank you," she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "That was incredibly brave," he shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the praise. "Just happened to be riding past." "Where were you headed?" "Caldwell. I have a position waiting at her ranch." "Which ranch?" "The Triple N. I'm the new housekeeper." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Is that right? Do you know it?" "I might." He glanced at the stagecoach driver who was checking his horses for injuries. Looks like your coach threw a wheel. Going to be a while before he gets you moving. I'm headed that direction. Can offer you a ride if you don't mind sitting double. The businessmen were already arguing about who would ride back to town for help. The sun was sinking toward the mountains, and Penelope had no desire to spend the night on this lonely stretch of road. I'd appreciate that, she said. He helped her secure her carpetbag to his saddle, then offered his hand. His palm was calloused, warm and steady. He swung up behind her, close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck, and gathered the reins. Name's Nathan Northwood, he said as they started moving. And you are? Penelope Pierce. Well, Miss Pierce, welcome to Idaho territory. They rode in silence for a while, the horse's steady gait eating up the miles. The landscape rolled past, all golden grass and sage, with the Boise Mountains rising purple in the distance. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way that made her chest ache. You ever worked on a ranch before? Nathan asked. No, she admitted, but I'm a quick learner. Where are you from? Denver, originally Philadelphia. The lies came easier now, smoothed by repetition. I was governess to a family there, but the children grew older and no longer needed my services. She felt him shift behind her. That's a fair distance to travel for a housekeeper position. I wanted a change of scenery. Most folks want to go to cities, not away from them. I'm not most folks. He made a sound that might have been agreement. The Triple N is a good operation. Cattle ranch, about 2,000 head. The owner works hard, expects the same from his people, but he's fair. You know him well, you could say that. They crested a rise and the ranch sprawled below them. It was larger than she'd expected, with a main house, barn, bunkhouse, and several outbuildings arranged around a central yard. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and she could see men working near the corrals. Smoke rose from the cookhouse chimney, carrying the scent of beef and beans. Nathan guided the horse down the slope and into the yard. Several ranch hands looked up from their work, their expressions curious. A grizzled man with a salt and pepper beard approached, wiping his hands on his vest. Boss, he said, nodding at Nathan. Then his eyes found Penelope. This the new housekeeper? Penelope's stomach dropped. Boss, Nathan dismounted and helped her down, his hands steady on her waist. Miss Pierce, welcome to the Triple N. I'm Nathan Northwood and this is my ranch. Heat flooded her face. You let me think you were just a ranch hand. You assumed. I didn't correct you, which I apologize for, but I wanted to hear what you'd say without knowing who I was. He turned to the older man. Tom, this is Miss Penelope Pierce. Miss Pierce, Tom Hawkins, my foreman. Tom tipped his hat. Pleasure, miss. I'll have one of the boys take your bag to the house. Nathan gestured toward the main building. Let me show you around. She wanted to be angry at his deception, but she'd built her entire journey on lies. She could hardly fault him for a small omission. She followed him across the yard, aware of curious eyes tracking their progress. The ranch house was solidly built, 2 stories of weathered wood with a wide porch wrapped around 3 sides. Inside, it was clean but Spartan, decorated with the bare minimum of furniture a bachelor might tolerate. The main room held a large stone fireplace, a worn sofa and several chairs. A dining table big enough to seat 12 dominated one end. Everything was functional, nothing frivolous. Kitchen's through there, Nathan said, pointing. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. My room's at the end of the hall. Tom and the boys bunk in the bunkhouse, but they take their meals here. Breakfast at 5, dinner at noon, supper at 7. I don't expect fancy, just filling. Penelope looked around, calculating. How many men? 12, including Tom and myself. I see. She'd cooked for her boarding school when she was younger, before her father struck gold in Colorado and decided his daughter needed refinement. She could manage 12 men, probably. What are my other duties? keeping the house clean, mending when needed, helping with preserves and such. I'll pay you $25 a month plus room and board. It was generous, more than she'd expected. Suspicion prickled. Why? Why what? Why pay so much for a housekeeper? There must be women in town who'd work for less. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, studying her. Because the last 3 housekeepers quit within a month. The men are rough around the edges, the work's hard, and it's isolated out here. I'm paying for someone who'll stay. I'll stay, she said, and meant it. She had nowhere else to go. Good, he straightened. Tom said you came with excellent references. The lie sat heavy in her stomach. I try to do good work. I'm sure you do. He moved toward the door. Get settled. I'll have Tom bring your bag up. Supper's at 7, like I said. He was almost gone when she called out, Mr. Northwood. He turned back. Nathan, we don't stand much on ceremony here. Nathan, then, thank you for earlier on the road. You didn't have to help us. His expression softened. Yes, I did. Get some rest, Penelope. You look like you could use it. She watched him go, then climbed the stairs to her room. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the yard. Her carpetbag sat on the bed, delivered by invisible hands. She sank onto the mattress and let herself shake. She'd made it. She was safe, at least for now. The question was how long she could keep up the pretense of being someone she wasn't. That evening, she presented herself in the kitchen at 6:30, determined to prove her worth. The previous housekeeper had left basic supplies, and Penelope threw herself into preparing supper with the kind of desperation that comes from having something to prove. She found beef already cooking in the oven, potatoes waiting to be mashed, and canned beans that needed warming. It wasn't fancy, but it was hot and plentiful. The men filed in at 7, scrubbed clean and surprisingly polite. They took their seats with a clatter of boots and chairs, watching her with open curiosity. Nathan sat at the head of the table, Tom at his right hand. Gentlemen, Nathan said, this is Miss Pierce, our new housekeeper. I expect you to treat her with respect and keep your language clean when she's around. Anyone who can't manage that can find employment elsewhere. A chorus of yes, boss, rippled around the table. Supper passed with surprising ease. The men were hungry and appreciative, and if the food wasn't extraordinary, it was competent. Penelope moved between the kitchen and dining room, refilling platters and coffee cups, hyper-aware of Nathan's presence at the head of the table. He ate with the same efficient economy he seemed to bring to everything, occasionally joining the conversation but mostly listening. After the men had dispersed to the bunkhouse or evening chores, Penelope tackled the mountain of dishes. She was elbow-deep in soapy water when Nathan appeared in the doorway. You don't have to do those tonight, he said. You've had a long day. I don't mind. She scrubbed at a stubborn bit of burned potato. It helps me think. He moved into the room, picking up a dish towel. Then I'll help. You don't have to do that. I know. He took a clean plate from the rack and began drying, but my mother raised me to be useful, and I'm not much for sitting idle. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. Penelope was acutely aware of his proximity, the way his sleeves were rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, the easy competence of his movements. Those men on the road, she said, breaking the quiet. Do you think they'll come back? Not likely. They were opportunists, looking for easy pickings. Once someone fights back, they usually move on. Have you always been so comfortable with violence? The question came out sharper than she intended. He paused in his drying, considering. I'm comfortable protecting what's mine and helping folks who need it. That's different than seeking out violence. He set down a plate. My father died when I was 15. Cattle rustlers hit our place in Wyoming and he went out to stop them. They shot him, left my mother and me to fend for ourselves. I'm sorry, Penelope said, the words inadequate. It taught me that sometimes you have to fight, and if you're going to fight, you'd better know how. He picked up another plate. We lost the ranch in Wyoming. Couldn't keep up with the work, and the vultures circled. I swore I'd never let that happen again. Came here 5 years ago, bought this land, built it up from nothing. She heard the pride in his voice, the determination. You've done well. I've been lucky. Good men working for me, decent weather most years, fair prices for cattle. He glanced at her. What about you? What brings a governess from Philadelphia to a cattle ranch in Idaho? The lies were ready, polished smooth. I wanted a new start. The city felt suffocating. No family to hold you there. Her throat tightened. No one who matters. It was the most honest thing she'd said all day. Nathan set down the towel and turned to face her fully. Penelope, I'm going to be straight with you. I don't know your story and I won't pry, but I can tell you're running from something. That's all right. A lot of folks in the territories are running from something. What matters to me is who you are now, not who you were before. Tears stung her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. What if who I am now disappoints you? What if it doesn't? I'll disappoint you eventually, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I'm not really a governess. I've never run a household this size. I can barely cook, and I'm bound to make mistakes, and when you figure out that I've been lying about almost everything, you'll send me away, and I have nowhere else to go. The confession hung in the air between them. She waited for anger, for rejection, for the inevitable dismissal. Instead, Nathan smiled, a slow, warm expression that transformed his weathered face. You already exceed every hope I had. What? The last housekeeper lasted 3 days before she ran off with a traveling salesman. The one before that drank my cooking sherry and passed out in the parlor. And the one before that tried to poison the men with her biscuits, though I think that was accidental. He leaned against the counter. You showed up, worked hard, fed 12 hungry men without complaining, and you're still standing. As far as I'm concerned, you're already doing better than I expected. But I lied to you. About being a governess, maybe, but I saw you on that road today. You didn't panic when those robbers showed up. You didn't fall apart. That tells me more about your character than any reference letter. He crossed his arms. Here's what I'm offering. You stay, do your best, learn as you go. I'll be patient with mistakes. In return, you'll have a place to sleep, food to eat, and honest wages. No questions asked about where you came from or what you're running from. Does that sound fair? It sounded too good to be true, which meant there had to be a catch. But looking into his steady gaze, Penelope couldn't find the angle. Why are you being so kind to me? Nathan paused, seeming to weigh his words. Because 5 years ago, Tom Hawkins found me half-starved in a mining camp, gave me work when no one else would, and never asked why I was there. He taught me that sometimes people just need a chance. I figure I can pass that along. Something in her chest loosened, a knot she'd been carrying for weeks finally beginning to unravel. All right, I'll stay, and I'll do better than just standing. I don't doubt it. He pushed off the counter. Get some sleep, Penelope. Tomorrow starts early around here. She watched him go, then finished the dishes alone, her mind churning. She'd expected judgment, anger, or at best indifference. Instead, she'd found understanding from the most unexpected source. It was disorienting and oddly comforting all at once. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was both exhausting and strangely satisfying. Penelope rose before dawn, started the coffee, and began preparing breakfast while the ranch slowly came to life around her. The men were good-natured about her learning curve, only occasionally wincing at burnt bacon or undersalted beans. Tom proved to be an unexpected ally, sharing his mother's recipes and tips for cooking in quantity. Nathan was a constant, steady presence. He worked alongside his men, mending fences, breaking horses, moving cattle. But he always appeared for meals, and most evenings he'd find his way to the kitchen, ostensibly to help with dishes, but really, Penelope suspected, to talk. She learned about his childhood in Wyoming, his mother who died of pneumonia 2 years after his father, his years drifting before finding his way to Idaho. He told stories about difficult cattle drives, harsh winters, and the satisfaction of building something lasting. In return, she offered carefully edited pieces of her own history, her mother's death when she was 12, her love of reading, her dreams of something more than what society expected of her. What she didn't mention was her father's mining fortune, Marcus Whitley's wandering hands, or the manhunt that might still be searching for a missing heiress. One afternoon in early September, Penelope was in the vegetable garden behind the house, trying to salvage the last of the summer squash before the first frost, when she heard horses approaching at speed. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw 3 riders coming up the drive. They weren't ranch hands. Their clothes were too fine, their horses too sleek. The lead rider wore a badge that caught the light. Her heart stopped. She dropped the squash and ran for the house, but they'd already dismounted and were heading for the front porch. Nathan emerged from the barn, Tom beside him, both men alert to the presence of lawmen on their property. "Help you gentlemen," Nathan called. The sheriff, a portly man with impressive mustaches, tipped his hat. "Looking for Nathan Northwood. You found him." "Sheriff Dalton from Boise. Got a telegram from Denver, asking if we'd seen a young woman, gone missing about a month ago. Penelope Pierce, daughter of mining magnate Howard Pierce. There's a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return." Penelope's knees buckled. She caught herself on the porch railing, fighting the urge to run. Nathan's expression didn't change. "That's so. Description matches your housekeeper, from what I hear in town. Thought I'd ride out and have a conversation." "Well, you're welcome to try, but I should warn you, Miss Pierce doesn't take kindly to being interrogated." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "You're not denying she's here?" "Why would I? She works for me, doesn't break any laws that I know of, and what she does in her free time is her own business." Nathan's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. "Now, if you've got a warrant for her arrest, I'd like to see it. Otherwise, you're on my land without invitation." Penelope forced herself to step forward. "I'm here, Sheriff, and yes, I'm Penelope Pierce, but I'm not missing. I left Denver of my own free will, and I'm not going back." Sheriff Dalton studied her with shrewd eyes. "Your father's worried sick. Says you were supposed to get married, disappeared the night before the wedding." "My father arranged a marriage I didn't want to a man I couldn't stand, so I left." "That's not a crime. It is if you stole money to do it." There it was. Penelope lifted her chin. "I took what I felt I was owed for 18 years of being a decorative object in my father's house. If he wants to call that theft, he's welcome to try." "Miss Pierce," the sheriff said, not unkindly, "you're putting me in a difficult position. Your father's an influential man. He's got friends who want answers. Then tell them I'm alive, healthy, and choosing to stay here. If that's not good enough, they know where to find me." Nathan stepped closer, not quite between Penelope and the sheriff, but near enough to make his position clear. "Sheriff, I appreciate you riding all the way out here, but like Miss Pierce said, she's an adult woman making her own choices. Unless you've got legal grounds to take her, I'm going to have to ask you to leave my property." The standoff stretched. Sheriff Dalton looked between them, calculating. Finally, he sighed. "I'll pass along that you're safe and choosing to stay. But Miss Pierce, I'd suggest you write your father a letter, explain yourself proper-like. Otherwise, this won't be the last visit you get from lawmen." "I'll do that," Penelope said, though the thought made her stomach churn. The sheriff and his deputies mounted up and rode out. Penelope waited until they were out of sight before her legs gave out entirely. She sank onto the porch steps, shaking. Nathan sat beside her. "You all right? I'm so sorry. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Would it have changed anything? She thought about that. No. I still would have needed a place to go. Then I'm not sure what you're apologizing for. He stretched his legs out, boots dusty in the afternoon sun. Mining magnate's daughter, huh? That explains the good posture. A laugh bubbled up, slightly hysterical. That's what you take from this. Well, it's either that or comment on how you've been living in my house under false pretenses. And since I already told you I don't care about that, seems like wasted breath. She turned to look at him, this man who kept surprising her. Why aren't you angry? Why would I be angry? You wanted freedom, you took it. That takes courage. He met her gaze. Though I am curious about one thing. What? This man your father wanted you to marry, was he cruel to you? The question was asked softly, but there was something dangerous in Nathan's tone. Penelope chose her words carefully. He was arrogant and handsome, and used to getting what he wanted. His hands would wander during chaperoned visits, and his father owned a silver mine that would pair nicely with my father's gold. That's all that mattered to anyone. Nathan's jaw tightened. I see. I wasn't going to become property in a business transaction, so I ran. Good. He stood, offering his hand. Come on, you've got supper to make, and I've got to explain to Tom why we just told a sheriff to ride off my land. She let him pull her up, grateful for his steady warmth. Nathan, thank you for not handing me over. Penelope, I meant what I said that first night. What matters is who you are now. And the woman I've gotten to know these past weeks is honest, hardworking, and braver than she gives herself credit for. That's worth more than any amount of gold or silver. She wanted to kiss him. The urge was so sudden and fierce it took her breath away. Instead, she squeezed his hand and went inside to start dinner, feeling his eyes on her back the whole way. That evening, after the men had eaten and dispersed, Penelope sat at the dining table with pen and paper. Nathan had tactfully made himself scarce, taking a bottle of whiskey and a book to the front porch. She could see his shadow through the window, a comforting presence. The letter took 3 attempts. The first was too angry, the second too apologetic. The third struck a balance she could live with. Father, by now you know where I am. I'm writing to assure you that I'm safe, employed, and not coming back to Denver. I won't marry Marcus Whitley or anyone else you choose for me. I understand you believe you were acting in my best interests, but you never asked what I wanted. You never considered that I might have dreams of my own. I've taken $37 from your desk, which I consider fair payment for 18 years of obedience. If you disagree, you may consider it a loan. I'll repay you when I'm able. Please don't send anyone else looking for me. I'm exactly where I want to be. Your daughter, Penelope. She sealed the envelope and left it on the hall table for the next trip to town. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That would have to be enough. She found Nathan on the porch, book abandoned, staring out at the darkening landscape. He glanced up as she settled into the chair beside his. Letter written, for what it's worth. Think it'll work. I think my father is stubborn and used to getting his way, but I can be stubborn too. She pulled her shawl tighter against the evening chill. What are you reading? He held up the book. Homer's Odyssey. It belonged to my mother. She was determined I'd have some culture, even on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. What's your favorite part? When Odysseus finally makes it home. After all those years of wandering, all the battles and losses, he just wants to be in his own house with his own people. Nathan set the book aside. Always seemed to me that was worth more than all the glory and adventure. Having somewhere to belong. Exactly. He looked at her, the fading light catching in his eyes. "You belong here, Penelope, however long you want to stay." Her throat tightened. "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're kind to the men even when they make extra work for you. I know you've been teaching the youngest hand to read during his breaks. I know you saved 6 kittens you found in the barn and talked Tom into building them a box near the stove. I know you bite your lip when you're concentrating and you hum while you cook, and you watch the mountains like they hold secrets you're trying to figure out." He paused. "So maybe I don't know where you came from, but I know who you are, and I like her quite a bit." Penelope's heart hammered against her ribs. "Nathan, I don't think I'm the kind of woman you should get attached to." "Why not?" "Because I'm trouble. You heard the sheriff. My father has influence and money, and he's not going to stop at one visit, because I don't know how to be a rancher's wife. I can barely manage as a housekeeper, because eventually you'll realize I'm not worth the complications I bring." The words tumbled out, all her fears laid bare. "I'll disappoint you eventually." Nathan stood and crossed to her chair. He knelt beside it, bringing his eyes level with hers, and took her hand in both of his. "Penelope, you already exceed every hope I had. How can you say that? You've known me for less than a month. And in that month you've made this house feel like a home for the first time since I built it. You've brought laughter and warmth and something I didn't even know I was missing. Yes, you come with complications. So do I. Yes, your father might cause trouble. We'll handle it. As for disappointing me," he shook his head. "The only way you could disappoint me is if you leave before giving this thing between us a chance." Her breath caught. "What thing? Don't pretend you don't feel it. I see the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. I see how you smile when I walk into a room." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I'm not smooth with words like city men probably are, and I can't offer you fancy parties or a life of ease. But I can offer you a home, a partnership, and a man who'll spend every day trying to deserve you, if you're willing to take that chance." She should say no. She should explain all the reasons this was a terrible idea. She should protect him from the mess of her life. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, a question more than a statement. But then his hand came up to cup her cheek, gentle and sure, and she melted into him. He tasted like whiskey and something indefinably him, and when he pulled her closer, she went willingly, wrapping her arms around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe," she said, unable to stop smiling. "Ask me again in a few months. I can work with maybe." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise of patience. The trouble arrived 2 weeks later in the form of Marcus Whitley himself, accompanied by 4 hired guns and enough arrogance to fill a canyon. Penelope was hanging laundry when she saw them ride in, and she dropped the sheet she was holding, cotton pooling in the dust. Nathan emerged from the barn, Tom and several hands behind him. They'd seen the riders too. Marcus dismounted with theatrical flair, brushing dust from his expensive coat. He was handsome in a polished way, with blonde hair and blue eyes that women sighed over. Penelope had once found him attractive before she'd learned what kind of man hid behind the pretty face. "Penelope, darling," he called, spreading his arms. "You've led us on quite a chase." She moved to stand beside Nathan, whose hand found the small of her back, steadying, supporting. "Mr. Whitley, I thought my letter made my position clear." "Your father's letter?" "Yes, he showed it to me. Quite the temper tantrum." Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But we both know you didn't mean it. You were overwhelmed by wedding jitters, perfectly understandable. I'm here to bring you home, and we'll forget this little adventure ever happened. I'm not going anywhere with you. Don't be difficult, darling. This has gone on long enough. Your reputation is already in tatters. If you don't come back now and marry me as planned, you'll be ruined. No decent man will ever want you." Nathan's hand tightened on her back. "She said no, Whitley. I suggest you respect that and ride out." Marcus's gaze shifted, taking in Nathan's work-worn clothes and weathered face. Disdain curled his lip. "And you are Nathan Northwood. This is my ranch, and you're not welcome here." "Ah, the rancher. Yes, the sheriff mentioned you. Tell me, Northwood, did Penelope mention that her father is offering $10,000 for her safe return? That's a lot of money for a dirt farmer." "It's a cattle ranch, and I'm not interested in your money." "Everyone's interested in money." Marcus gestured to his hired guns. "I'm prepared to be generous. Let me take Penelope back to Denver, and I'll personally see to it that you receive $5,000. You can buy more land, more cattle. Everyone wins. Except Penelope, she'll be fine. Women always adjust once they're married. It's in their nature." Penelope felt Nathan go very still beside her. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm going to give you one chance to leave peacefully. After that, things get unpleasant." Marcus laughed. "You and how many men? I count 4 guns on my side. Do you really want to test your luck?" Tom stepped forward. "He's got 12 men, and every one of us knows how to shoot. More than that, we know what side of right we're standing on. Question is, do your hired hands care enough about your money to die for it?" The hired guns shifted uneasily. They were professionals, not zealots. Marcus's expression hardened. "Penelope, if you don't come with me now, your father will cut you off completely. No inheritance, no family, nothing. Is that really what you want? To throw away everything for some cowboy you barely know?" Penelope stepped away from Nathan, forcing herself to face Marcus directly. "I'd rather have nothing with a man who respects me than everything with one who treats me like property. Go back to Denver, Marcus. Tell my father I'm exactly where I want to be. If he wants to disown me, that's his choice. You're making a mistake." "No," she said clearly. "Agreeing to marry you would have been the mistake. This is me correcting it." Marcus's face flushed an ugly red. "You'll regret this, Penelope. You think this rancher actually cares about you? He's probably just after your money." "I don't have any money. You just said my father would cut me off." "He'd take you back if you came to your senses. And when you do, I won't be waiting. You'll have lost your chance at a good life." Nathan moved then, a blur of motion that put him between Penelope and Marcus. "She's told you no 3 times now. I'm not inclined to listen to a 4th. You and your men are going to mount up and ride out. If you come back, I'll have the sheriff arrest you for trespassing and harassment. Are we clear?" For a moment, Penelope thought Marcus might actually do something violent. His hand twitched toward his hip, and the ranch hands tensed. But then one of his hired guns cleared his throat. "Boss, maybe we should head back. The lady's made her choice." Marcus glared at him, then at Nathan, then finally at Penelope. "This isn't over." "Yes," Penelope said firmly. "It is." She watched them ride away, Marcus's spine rigid with fury. Relief left her weak-kneed. Nathan turned to her, his hands framing her face. "You all right?" "I think I actually am," she laughed, slightly giddy. "I just told Marcus Whitley to go to hell." "You did. It was magnificent." He kissed her forehead. "But he's going to go back to Denver and make trouble. You know that, right?" "Let him. I meant what I said. I'd rather have nothing with you than everything with him." Tom cleared his throat. "Boss might want to post guards for a few nights, just in case Whitley gets creative." "Good thinking." "Set up a rotation." Nathan's arms were still around her, solid and warm. "Come on, let's get inside." That evening, after supper had been served and cleaned up, Nathan found Penelope in the parlor, staring into the fire. He settled beside her on the sofa, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Having second thoughts." "About what?" "Sending Whitley away. Choosing this life." She shook her head. No, but I am thinking about what he said, about money and my future. I've never had to worry about supporting myself before. What if I'm not good enough at this? What if I can't pull my weight? Penelope, you've been pulling your weight and then some. The men are better fed than they've been in years. The house is cleaner, and more than that, they're happier. You listen to their stories, remember their birthdays, care about their lives. That's worth more than any amount of housework. But I don't contribute financially. I'm a drain on your resources. Nathan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. Can I tell you something? When I bought this land, I had a plan. Build a successful ranch, save money, eventually find a wife and start a family. Everything in that order, neat and controlled. But life doesn't work that way. You showed up, and suddenly all those careful plans didn't matter anymore. What mattered was making you smile, hearing you laugh, finding excuses to spend time with you. Her heart stuttered. Nathan, I'm not finished. What I'm trying to say, probably badly, is that you're not a drain. You're the reason I look forward to coming home at night instead of just collapsing in bed exhausted. You're the reason this house feels like more than just a building. And if your father wants to cut you off and Marcus Whitley wants to make threats, fine. We'll face it together. Because I don't want to do this life without you anymore. Tears pricked her eyes. You're not saying this just because you feel obligated, are you? Because I'm in trouble and you're a decent man. I'm saying this because I'm falling in love with you, Penelope Pierce. Have been since you dropped that locket in the robber's bag and looked like your heart was breaking. I wanted to give it back to you, give you everything you'd lost and more. And that feeling hasn't gone away. It just keeps getting stronger. She kissed him then, pouring all her fear and hope and desperate affection into it. He responded with equal intensity, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. When they finally broke apart, she was half in his lap, her fingers tangled in his hair. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered, and it terrifies me. Why? Because what if I lose this? What if my father or Marcus finds a way to take it away? They can't take away what you don't let them have. This is ours, Penelope. You and me, they don't get a say in it. She rested her head on his shoulder, letting his certainty anchor her. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, carrying the promise of winter. But inside, wrapped in Nathan's arms, she felt safe for the first time in months. The weeks turned into months, autumn giving way to winter's harsh grip. Snow blanketed the ranch, turning everything white and quiet. The work changed with the seasons, became harder in some ways and easier in others. Fewer cattle to move but more animals to feed through the cold. Less time outdoors but more time for indoor projects and repairs. Penelope learned to bake bread that didn't come out like bricks. She mastered the art of cooking for hungry men who worked in freezing temperatures. She helped Tom's wife, Sarah, whom she'd met on trips to town, put up preserves and taught her in return how to read French. She knitted socks for the ranch hands and listened to their stories and made the ranch house a place where people wanted to gather. And through it all, Nathan was there. Teaching her to ride properly, helping with heavy pots, stealing kisses in the pantry when the men weren't looking. They grew closer with each passing day, learning each other's rhythms and moods, building something that felt solid and real. Christmas came with a surprise snowstorm that trapped everyone inside for 3 days. Penelope organized games and convinced Tom to share his fiddle playing, and the house rang with music and laughter. Nathan gave her a pair of riding gloves, butter-soft leather dyed deep green, and she gave him a new copy of the Odyssey to replace his mother's falling-apart edition. I couldn't, he protested, looking at the inscription she'd written inside. You can and you will. Your mother's copy belongs on a shelf where it's safe. This one is for reading. He kissed her in front of everyone, which made the men hoot and Tom laugh, and Penelope felt something settle in her chest. This was home. These people were family. Then in January, a telegram arrived. Tom brought it to the house, his expression grim. Nathan read it twice, then handed it to Penelope. Howard Pierce died January 15th. Stop funeral, January 20th. Stop you are sole heir. Stop lawyer requests your presence. Stop Marcus Whitley contesting will stop. Penelope stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. Her father was dead. She'd spent months pushing him away, building a new life, and now he was simply gone. No chance for reconciliation, no possibility of eventual understanding, just gone. I have to go back, she said numbly. Nathan's jaw tightened. Not alone, you don't. You can't leave the ranch in winter. Tom can manage for a few weeks. I'm coming with you. She wanted to argue, but the relief was overwhelming. She didn't want to face Denver alone, didn't want to navigate lawyers and Marcus and her father's legacy without Nathan beside her. They left 2 days later, taking the train from Boise. Penelope watched Idaho disappear behind them, mountains giving way to plains, and felt like she was traveling backward in time. Nathan held her hand the entire way, solid and reassuring. Denver was both familiar and foreign, like a place she'd visited in a dream. The Pierce mansion loomed on Capitol Hill, all stone and stained glass and painful memories. The butler who answered the door didn't recognize her at first, then his eyes widened. "Miss Pierce, we heard you were coming. The reading of the will is tomorrow at 10. Mr. Whitley has been most insistent about being present." "I'm sure he has," Penelope said dryly. "This is Mr. Northwood. He'll be staying as my guest." If the butler found anything unusual about the housekeeper returning with a rough-dressed rancher in tow, he was too professional to show it. They were shown to separate bedrooms, though Nathan looked ready to protest. That evening, Penelope walked through her childhood home, seeing it with new eyes. The expensive furniture, the imported carpets, the art her father had collected to prove his wealth and taste. It all felt hollow, a monument to a man who'd valued status over love. She found Nathan in the library, examining her father's collection of books. "He never read them," she said from the doorway. "He bought them by the shelf because someone told him rich men should have libraries. That's sad. That was my father. Everything for show, nothing for substance." She moved into the room. "I'm sorry you're here. I know this isn't comfortable for you. I'm where you are. That's comfortable enough." He pulled her close. "How are you holding up?" "I don't know. I keep expecting to feel something. Grief, sadness, anything, but I'm just numb." "It'll hit when you're ready. Grief doesn't follow schedules." She leaned into him, grateful for his presence. "I'm glad you're here. Nowhere else I'd rather be." The will reading was exactly as awful as Penelope had anticipated. The lawyer, a pinch-faced man named Carmichael, droned through legal language while Marcus Whitley sat across from her, radiating hostility. He'd brought his own lawyer, a shark-eyed man who kept whispering in his ear. The substance was simple. Howard Pierce had left everything to his daughter. The mines, the investments, the property, all of it. Marcus's claim was that Penelope had been declared mentally incompetent when she fled Denver, and therefore the will should be voided in favor of Pierce's business partner who would manage the assets responsibly. It was absurd and insulting, and Carmichael said as much. Mr. Pierce never declared his daughter incompetent. He was angry, yes, but he never questioned her mental capacity. In fact, his final letter to me specifically mentioned that Miss Pierce had inherited his stubborn streak and would make her own choices regardless of his wishes. He respected that, even if he didn't like it. The man was clearly not in his right mind, Marcus's lawyer argued. Leaving a fortune to a woman who abandoned her family and responsibilities. A woman who exercised her legal right to refuse a marriage, Carmichael interrupted coldly. Miss Pierce is of age, sound mind, and her father's legitimate heir. Unless you have actual grounds to contest, I suggest we conclude this meeting. There was more argument, more posturing, but the outcome was clear. Penelope inherited everything. Marcus stormed out and his lawyer followed, muttering threats about appeals. Afterward, Carmichael invited Penelope into his private office. Nathan came too, and the lawyer didn't object. Miss Pierce, I'll be frank. Your father's estate is substantial. Between the mines, real estate, and investments, you're looking at approximately $300,000 in assets. The number was staggering. Penelope felt dizzy. What am I supposed to do with all that? Whatever you wish. You could sell it, manage it yourself, or hire someone to handle it for you. I'd be happy to continue as your legal counsel if you desire. She looked at Nathan, who was carefully neutral. What do you think? It's your inheritance, Penelope, your choice. But it affects you too. If we're going to build a life together, she stopped, realizing what she'd just implied. Nathan's eyes warmed. If we're building a life together, we'll figure it out. But this money is yours. I don't have any claim to it, and I don't want one. I fell in love with a housekeeper, not an heiress. Carmichael cleared his throat delicately. Might I make a suggestion? Don't make any hasty decisions. Take time to think about what you want. The estate has been running itself for years with good management. Another few months won't matter. It was sensible advice, and Penelope took it. She signed the necessary papers, confirmed Carmichael's continued employment, and promised to make long-term decisions later. Then she and Nathan left Denver as quickly as possible, taking the next train back to Idaho. The mountains appeared on the horizon, and Penelope felt her shoulders relax. Nathan noticed and smiled. Good to be going home, is it obvious, little bit? He pulled her close, unconcerned with the other passengers' curious looks. What are you thinking? That I don't want that money. It feels like blood money, payment for 18 years of being my father's property. It's not about what he did or didn't do. It's about what you can do with it now. She thought about that as the train carried them west. By the time they reached Caldwell, she'd made a decision. Tom met them at the station with the wagon, eager for news. On the ride back to the ranch, Penelope laid out her plan. I'm selling the Denver properties, keeping the mine investments because they provide income for a lot of families. The proceeds from the sales will be divided. Some will go to charities, some to start a school in Caldwell, and the rest, she took a breath. The rest I want to invest in the ranch. Improve the facilities, buy better breeding stock, maybe acquire some adjacent land. Make the Triple N into something that can support not just us but the next generation. Nathan had gone very still. Penelope, that's your money. And I'm choosing to invest it in our future. Unless you object, I don't want you to think I expect it or that I'm with you for it. Nathan Northwood, you told a sheriff to leave your property to protect me when you thought I was a runaway housekeeper with $37 to my name. You traveled to Denver in the middle of winter to stand beside me. You've never once asked about my father's money or tried to benefit from it. I know exactly why you're with me. She took his hand. Let me do this. Let me take something ugly from my past and turn it into something good for our future. He looked at Tom, who shrugged. Boss, if I had a woman wanting to invest in improving my life, I wouldn't argue. Nathan pulled Penelope into his arms, right there in the wagon, and kissed her thoroughly. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Then yes, thank you, and Penelope. Yes, marry me. It wasn't a question so much as a statement, and she laughed, joy bubbling up. Is that a proposal? It's a fact. I love you, you love me, we're building a life together. Seems like marriage is the logical next step. His eyes were warm with humor and something deeper. "But if you want me to get down on one knee and make a speech, I can do that too. Here, in front of Tom, I've seen plenty of proposals," Tom said mildly. "Won't bother me none." Nathan started to climb down from the wagon, but Penelope stopped him. "Nathan, wait. Yes. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. No speeches or knees required. Just yes." He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise and a beginning. When they finally broke apart, Tom was grinning. "About time, boss. I was starting to think you'd never ask." They were married in March, when the snow was melting and the first green shoots were appearing on the hillsides. The ceremony took place in Caldwell's small church, with Tom as best man and Sarah as matron of honor. The ranch hands attended in their Sunday best, and half the town showed up out of curiosity about the heiress, who'd married a rancher. Penelope wore a simple blue dress, not the elaborate white monstrosity her father had commissioned. Nathan wore a new suit that made him uncomfortable, but he stood straight and proud as they exchanged vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan's kiss was gentle and reverent, and Penelope felt tears stream down her cheeks. They celebrated with a party at the ranch that lasted into the evening. Someone produced a fiddle, someone else a guitar, and there was dancing in the yard under strings of lanterns. Penelope danced with Nathan, with Tom, with each of the ranch hands who'd become her friends. She ate cake and laughed and felt surrounded by love. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Nathan pulled her away from the crowd. They walked to the rise above the house, where they could see the ranch spread below them, lights twinkling in the growing darkness. "Happy?" he asked. Deliriously. She leaned into him, his arm coming around her waist. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when I was trying to disappear. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For giving me a home. Penelope, you gave me just as much. More, maybe." He turned her to face him. "I built this ranch thinking it would be enough. Land, cattle, success. But it was just a place until you arrived. You made it a home. You made me understand what I was really building toward." She kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Ready to start our life together, Mrs. Northwood? I've been ready since the day you said I exceeded your hopes." They walked back down to the house hand in hand, toward the light and warmth and the future they'd chosen together. The years that followed were full in all the best ways. True to her word, Penelope invested her inheritance wisely. The ranch expanded, acquiring 2 adjacent properties. They improved the facilities, built a new barn, purchased better breeding stock. The Triple N became known throughout Idaho for quality cattle and fair dealing. But more than the physical improvements, they built something intangible. The ranch became a place where people wanted to work, where they were treated with dignity and paid fairly. Several of their hands brought wives and started families, building homes on ranch land. What had started as a cattle operation became a community. Penelope used part of her inheritance to establish a school in Caldwell, ensuring that children in the area had access to education. She worked with Sarah and other women in town to create a lending library, and she quietly supported families in need, never seeking recognition. She and Nathan learned the rhythms of partnership. They disagreed sometimes about ranch decisions or how to handle problems, but they'd learned to talk through their differences. Nathan taught her about cattle and horses, about reading weather and land. She taught him about books and music, about creating a home that nourished more than just bodies. In the spring of 1884, their first child arrived. A son, born during a thunderstorm that shook the house. They named him Thomas Nathan, after Tom, who'd become like family, and Nathan's father. Little Tommy had his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and Nathan wept when he first held him, overcome with joy and terror at the tiny life in his arms. "I don't know how to be a father," he confessed to Penelope as she recovered in their bed. "You'll learn. We both will." She reached for his hand. Together. Tommy was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Grace Alina, after Nathan's mother and Penelope's. Grace was all fire and determination from the moment she arrived, letting the world know her opinions with lusty cries. She had Penelope's blonde hair and Nathan's talent for getting into trouble. The children grew up surrounded by love and land, learning to ride before they could properly walk, helping with chores as soon as they were able. Tommy was quiet and thoughtful like his father, while Grace was bold and curious like her mother. They fought and played and drove their parents to distraction in equal measure. One evening when Tommy was 7 and Grace was 5, Penelope found Nathan on the porch, watching the children play in the yard. She settled beside him and he pulled her close. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm grateful for all of this for you." He kissed her temple. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving Denver, giving up that life?" "Not for a single second." "Do you regret taking in a lying housekeeper with a talent for burning bacon?" He laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "Best decision I ever made." "Well, second best. First was asking you to marry me." "I thought I proposed to you. You said yes before I could properly ask. That doesn't count." "It counts in my memory." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children chase fireflies. Inside, Tom and Sarah were helping clean up after supper, their voices carrying through the open windows. The ranch hands were settling in for the evening and cattle lowed in the distance. "Nathan," Penelope said softly. "Remember that first night when I told you I'd disappoint you eventually?" "I remember. I also remember telling you that you already exceeded every hope I had. You were right. About both of us. We exceeded what we hoped for." She turned to look at him, her husband, her partner, her love. "Thank you for seeing me when I was lost. Thank you for letting yourself be found." He cupped her face, his touch still sending warmth through her after all these years. "I love you, Penelope, more now than the day we married, which I didn't think was possible. I love you too, always." They kissed as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Around them, the ranch they'd built together settled into evening, full of life and laughter and love. It wasn't the life Penelope had been raised to expect, and it wasn't the one Nathan had planned for himself. It was better. Years continued to pass in the way they do on a working ranch, measured not just in calendar pages but in cattle sales and harvest seasons, in children's birthdays and the slow accumulation of shared memories. The Triple N prospered under their stewardship, weathering harsh winters and dry summers, adapting to changing markets and new technologies. Tommy grew into a young man with his father's steady hands and his mother's quick mind. He took to ranching naturally, understanding the cattle and the land in ways that couldn't be taught. Grace, meanwhile, showed little interest in ranch work but a keen aptitude for numbers. By age 12, she was helping keep the ranch's books, catching errors that would have cost them money. "She's got a gift," Nathan said one evening, watching Grace work through a complex calculation with ease. "We should send her to school in Boise, let her get a proper education." Penelope agreed, though the thought of their daughter leaving made her chest ache. When Grace turned 14, they enrolled her in a boarding school known for its progressive approach to educating young women. Grace thrived there, coming home for summers full of ideas and ambitions. Tommy, at 16, was essentially running day-to-day operations alongside his father. He'd grown tall and broad-shouldered, quiet in the way of men who are comfortable with themselves. The ranch hands respected him, and he handled responsibility with maturity beyond his years. One spring evening in 1895, Tom Hawkins passed away in his sleep, peacefully and without pain. Sarah found him in the morning, and her wail of grief brought the entire ranch running. Nathan took it hard, losing the man who'd been more father than friend, and for weeks he was quieter than usual, his grief a palpable presence. They buried Tom on a hill overlooking the ranch he'd helped build, with a simple stone marker that read Thomas Hawkins, good man, better friend. Half the county showed up for the funeral, testament to the lives he'd touched. That night, Penelope found Nathan standing at Tom's grave, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She wrapped her arms around him and held on while he finally let himself break. "He was the first person to believe in me," Nathan said when he could speak. "When I was nobody, just a kid with nothing, he gave me a chance. And you honored that by giving chances to others. Tom knew what he'd created. He was proud of you. I hope so. I know so. He told me once that you were the son he never had, that everything he'd worked for was in good hands with you." Nathan turned in her arms, burying his face in her shoulder. She held him, this strong man who'd always been her rock, and gave him space to grieve. Later, they'd celebrate Tom's life with stories and laughter. But in that moment, they simply stood together under the stars, mourning their friend. Sarah stayed on at the ranch, refusing to leave the place that held so many memories. She moved into a small cottage near the main house and became the children's beloved grandmother figure, spoiling them with sweets and stories. Grace, home from school for the summer, spent hours with Sarah, learning family recipes and listening to tales of the ranch's early days. In the fall of 1896, at 18, Tommy announced his intention to marry. Her name was Catherine Miller, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and she was sensible, kind, and clearly adored Tommy. Nathan gave his blessing. Penelope helped plan the wedding, and they celebrated as their son started his own family. Nathan built Tommy and Catherine a house on the eastern edge of the property, close enough to be part of the ranch community, but far enough to give them privacy. Watching his son settle into married life, Nathan reflected on his own journey. "I was 30 when I met you," he said to Penelope one evening. "Thought I'd missed my chance at this, at family, at love, and then you fell onto my stagecoach floor. Technically, I was thrown there by robbers. Still the best thing that ever happened to me." Grace graduated from her school with honors in 1898 and announced she had no intention of marrying anytime soon. She wanted to attend university, study mathematics and business, maybe become an accountant. It was an unusual ambition for a woman, but Penelope and Nathan had never been conventional parents. "If that's what you want, we'll find a way to make it happen," Nathan said. "I've already saved most of my allowance," Grace replied practically, "and I can work while studying. I don't expect you to pay for everything. Grace, honey, your mother is one of the wealthiest women in Idaho. Money's not the issue, I know, but I want to do this myself, prove I can." She looked between her parents. "You both built something from nothing. I want to know I can do the same." Penelope felt her eyes sting with tears. Her daughter had inherited more than her looks and her head for numbers. She'd inherited the stubborn independence that had driven Penelope to flee Denver all those years ago. "You'll do great things," Penelope said, pulling Grace into a hug. "I can't wait to see what they are." Tommy and Catherine's first child arrived in the spring of 1899, a daughter they named Penelope after her grandmother. Holding her tiny namesake, Penelope felt the circle complete. She'd fled Denver to escape being property, to forge her own path. And here she was, grandmother to a new generation, surrounded by family she'd chosen and built. Nathan stood beside her, looking at the baby with the same wonder he'd shown when holding Tommy for the first time. "We did all right, didn't we?" he said softly. "Better than all right. We did beautifully." As the new century approached, the ranch prepared for changes. Automobiles were appearing in Caldwell, electricity was coming to more areas, and the world was transforming. But some things remained constant: the land, the cattle, the cycles of seasons. The love that had started between a runaway heiress and a rancher who saw past her lies to the truth beneath. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1903, Nathan took Penelope back to the rise above the ranch where he'd proposed. The view had changed. More buildings, more fences, more signs of the community they'd built. But the mountains remained eternal and the sky was just as vast. 20 years, Penelope marveled. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. "Any regrets?" Nathan asked, echoing a question from long ago. "Not a single one. He pulled her close and she fit against him as perfectly as she had that first night on the porch. "I regret not asking you to marry me sooner. Should have done it the day you arrived. I would have said no. I wasn't ready. But you were ready 3 months later. I was ready the moment you said I exceeded your hopes. I just needed time to believe it." They stood together, watching the sun set over the empire they'd built. Not an empire of money or power, though they had both. An empire of love, family, and lives touched. The school in Caldwell bore Penelope's name now, educating hundreds of children. The ranch employed 30 families, providing steady work and fair wages. Grace was at university, writing letters full of discoveries and dreams. Tommy was raising his own family with the same values Nathan and Penelope had instilled. "I used to wonder what my father would think," Penelope said quietly, "if he'd be proud or angry or disappointed. And now I don't care. I built a life I'm proud of with a man I love, surrounded by people who matter. That's enough." Nathan kissed her soft and sweet, a kiss that held 20 years of partnership and promised 20 more. "I love you, Penelope Northwood." "I love you too, Nathan. Always." They walked back down to the house as stars began to appear, toward the light and warmth and the family waiting for them. Behind them, the mountains stood sentinel, and ahead, the future stretched bright and full of possibility. In 1910, Grace returned from university with a degree in mathematics and a job offer from a prominent accounting firm in San Francisco. She'd also brought someone special, a young professor named James who looked at her like she hung the moon. They were married in the ranch's garden, with Grace wearing Penelope's wedding dress altered to fit her taller frame. Tommy took over more of the ranch operations as Nathan began to slow down. His hair had gone silver, and his joints ached in cold weather, but he still rose early and rode out to check the cattle. Penelope's hair had silvered too, though she moved with the same grace that had first caught Nathan's eye. They had 4 grandchildren by then, with a 5th on the way. The main house rang with children's laughter on holidays, and Nathan built a bigger table to fit everyone for Sunday dinners. One evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set, Nathan took Penelope's hand. "Been thinking," he said, about how scared I was that day you told me you'd disappoint me eventually. Terrified you were right, that I'd lose you somehow. Nathan Northwood, are you getting sentimental in your old age? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just grateful for every day I get with you." He squeezed her hand. "You were wrong, about disappointing you, about disappointing me. You never have, not once. Every day with you has been better than the last." Penelope felt tears prick her eyes. "You were wrong too." "Oh, you said I already exceeded every hope you had." "But I think we exceeded our hopes together. Neither of us could have built this alone." "No," Nathan agreed. "But together we built something pretty remarkable." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the land they loved settle into evening. The ranch they'd built, the family they'd raised, the community they'd nurtured. It was everything Penelope had never known to hope for when she fled Denver all those years ago. She'd been running from a life that felt like a cage toward an uncertain future. And she'd found Nathan, who'd seen her fear and her lies and her desperate hope for something more, and said simply, "You already exceed every hope I had." He'd been right. They'd both been right. They'd exceeded hopes, surpassed dreams, and built a love that would outlast them both, carried forward in the children and grandchildren who bore their names and their values. As darkness fell and stars emerged, Nathan helped Penelope to her feet. They walked inside together, toward the warmth and light, toward the life they'd chosen and the love they'd nurtured. Behind them, the porch light glowed, a beacon against the night. Ahead, the rest of their lives stretched out, full of promise and peace. It was, Penelope thought as Nathan's arm came around her waist, exactly the ending she'd hoped for. Not an ending at all, really. Just another beginning, another chapter in a story that would continue long after they were gone. A story of love found, hope fulfilled, and two souls who'd found each other when they needed it most. And that, she knew with absolute certainty, was more than enough. It was everything.